by systems innovation, I will ask our moderator, Ina, to join us on the stage. Hello, Ina.
Good morning, Samantha. Hello from Berlin.
Hi, Ina. Welcome to the Climate-KIC Week of Action. This is our day 5, and we are super excited to start to get really deep into bigger projects, like bigger perspectives, and really started to understand how we can take action on a systematic level. So I thank you for joining us on this show, and I will pass on to you to kick off the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Before we start in introducing our wonderful speakers of today, I wanted to give you a little bit of the framing for our virtual panel discussion today. So yes, the main topic that we're exploring is systems innovation, and what does it mean, but not just in theory, but more in practice. And the question that we're exploring is how can different organizations apply systems innovation? So we want to start with this kind of broader understanding of like many of the biggest challenges that we face, including climate crisis, food insecurity, and growing inequalities, are kind of difficult to overcome because they are, at a larger scale, a product of complex systems interacting. As some of you might know, complex systems are basically composed of many interdependent parts that are highly interconnected, which means that all the decisions that each one of us make and take on a daily basis as individuals, as members of civil society, as parts of the organizations and corporates that we represent, governments, and a lot of other groups, they combine and interact, adding all different layers of complexity and making traditional approach to problem solving kind of irrelevant. So what we are exploring is how to create change on a systemic level that might require us to think and work in very novel ways and collaborate widely with different actors and stakeholders playing part of the system. So this is really at the core and heart of Climate-KIC's mission. So we're creating opportunities for people to come together and learn about what it takes as individuals and also as organizations, how to make systemic impact in order to see effective and rapid changes for the net zero future. So today we invited other practitioners in the field of systems innovation to join us in this exploration. And this session is meant to shed a bit of light on the systems innovation approach and more specifically practice around systems innovation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our wonderful panelists today, starting with Quentin Crowley, who is Director of Trinity Center of the Environment, Associate Professor of Geology, and Fellow at Trinity College Dublin in Ireland. He's also academic lead of EIT Climate-KICs at Trinity College Dublin. He's a keen advocate of multidisciplinary approaches of inquiry, analysis, and communication. His research is focused on Earth systems change. He's leading consortium for Climate-KIC Journey, Climate Leadership Journey, in collaboration with Climate-KIC and other academic and industry partners across European Union. And he's also co-lead of Ireland's Knowledge Centre for Carbon Project, which over the next 3 years is seeking to enable innovative and systemic adaptation of enterprise and society to decarbonized economy and sustainable living. Thank you, Quentin, for joining us.
Good morning, Ina.
Our second guest and second panelist is Kate Simpson. She is director at Wasafiri, and she leads the Systemcraft Insitute, which is dedicated to putting the tools for systems change in the hands of leaders everywhere. Wasafiri works across Africa and Europe, and their work focuses on the areas of conflict, food systems, and climate change, which they bring an applied systems change approach. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, Ina. Lovely to be here.
And our last panelist is Per Olsson, who is Associate Professor and Principal Researcher and Program Director at the Stockholm Resilience Center. He leads the center's work on transformation for sustainability, working with agency and system entrepreneurship. He is a transdisciplinary researcher and has worked in the interface of natural and social sciences and humanities. Welcome, Per.
Thanks, Ina. Thank you.
All right. While we're all here, this is an incredible way to start Monday morning. Thank you so much for joining. I would love to kick off our discussion with a little bit of framing of like, yes, we have this bigger question of what is systems innovation, but it's really easy to get lost in specific definitions and specific words. So my invitation to all of you would be to think about systems innovation from a perspective of principles, and what are some of the key ways and key principles how you can see application of systems innovation in your work. So over to you, Quentin, to kick us off.
Right, okay, thanks for the question. So really, when you think about it, systems innovation, by definition, it's innovation, and it's applied to very large scales. So it's a very large scale innovation. So if we take it back to basic principles, this really involves, being able to see what we sometimes call the bigger picture, but at the same time, not losing sight of all of the individual components, because really this is about understanding, complex interrelationships and interdependencies. So to be able to kind of trigger some systemic change, we need to be able to identify these things which are sometimes called levers of change. In other words, we can make tweaks or changes to a system where these changes can affect the entire system. So really it's been able to be analytical, to be able to spot trends in systems, to be able to think critically and identify these levers, and putting all these things together to kind of see the complexities of systems and to be able to apply this innovation in a systemic way, because only then can we really catalyze transformations of entire systems.
Thank you so much, Quentin. Kate, is there anything you would like to add and bring in your perspective into this question?
Yeah, thanks, Ina. So most of my work is with kind of practitioners and leaders. So maybe I come from a slightly different place. I totally agree with everything Quentin said, but maybe my practice space is a bit different. So I find that what systems innovation is about for the people I work with, it's about thinking about familiar problems in unfamiliar ways and using that to find new and different ways of intervening in them. And generally, complex problems are sticky. They've been around for ages. People have been like wrestling with them for a long time. And so we need to think about them in different ways to find different ways of dealing with them. And you asked for sort of principles, and because then I find people go, okay, I get that, Kate, but what does that mean? And how do I do that? And so, there's a set of different things, but I thought I'd share two today, particularly that I find are the ones that seem to be most powerful for people. The first is this idea that complex problems are produced by systems that are working. And when we say the system is broken, we actually become blind to the power in the system, because the resistance to change always sits in what is working and not in what isn't working. So, if we take something like climate change, the resistance to change doesn't sit in the fact that our temperature's going up and our oceans are acidifying and all those things. It sits in all the lovely things about a carbon-based economy. So I find that principle, it really unlocks things for people. It allows you to see, I guess, Quentin, to your point about interconnections, it allows you to see why things connect in certain ways or what drives some of those interconnections. And the second one I find really helpful for people as well is this idea of harnessing collective intelligence, which is about both who's allowed to be producers and consumers of knowledge about a system. And that's actually about who's agents of change, who acts on this system to create change. And I find that in the kind of public sector and the not-for-profit sector, we're great at seeing kind of people who live with the problem as producers of information. Go, oh yeah, let's go and do some consultation, let's ask people. But we don't often see them as people that, if they consume that knowledge and information about the system, they will then act autonomously to create change. And I guess that for me is where the scale piece comes in, that to tackle these complex problems, we need loads and loads of people doing loads and loads of different things from loads and loads of different entry points. So yeah, those are a couple to share. Could give you an example if you want, but you might want to move on to Pia at this point.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kate. Really important add-ons to this, and really questions of agency. It's coming through in a lot of work that we do as well. Per, over to you. How do you define systems innovation? What are some of the core principles that you would like to bring into this conversation?
Yeah, I think a lot of my thinking resonates well with Kate and Quentin's. For me, my definitions and the way that I use systems innovation is very much linked to transformation. So that's my background, and I think that I like this idea of systems innovation as things coming together, ideas, people coming together, and also how these systems innovation can challenge and change existing systems, and especially maybe challenge and change the systems that created the problems, and also that systems that doesn't deliver on things that we think are important. For example, like justice and sustainability. So when I talk about systems innovation, I put it in the context, I think, of relationships. So systems innovation, when we look at systems innovation, we're interested in how it changes the relationship to yourself and the inner work that you have to do for sort of contributing to systems change. And then it's the relationship to others, the relationship to the planet, the relationship to future generations, and also the relationship to our history. So that's the kind of context that we look at when it comes to systems innovation. Yeah, and then a couple of things that I think I want to talk about later is so systems innovation, not just as creating new things, but also to systems innovation for phasing out what's not working. Systems innovation in relation to crisis and how to navigate systems innovations for change or transformation. It requires incorporation of crisis. I want to talk about that, and then also this idea of harnessing maybe complexities, that complexity provides a whole different ways of, I think, thinking about systems innovation and transformation.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to see the richness of all of those different perspectives coming together. Fantastic so far. Like, we've talked already about different parts, relationships between different parts, interconnections, levers of change, finding the spots of resistance to change, finding the ways to cultivate agency and collective sense making, and this collective kind of reflections and bringing different perspectives together. It feels like we have quite a coherent vision, which is fantastic. We start with a common understanding of reality, and now I would really love us to move a little bit more into stories of a practical application of systems innovation. So I would like to invite you to share maybe how can organizations apply systems innovation from your own practice, and what do you notice in the field, and what are some of the key aspects that are in place when it comes to practical application of it. So yeah, let's go with Quentin again. Over to you.
Okay, so how can organizations apply systems innovation? It's a really good question, but for me, I'd like to take a step back for just a second, because for me, the question starts with a why rather than a how. So you might think about, why would an organization apply systems innovation really in the first instance? And I suppose from the perspective of an organization, whatever its type or its scale, this organization really first needs to understand what is the importance of systems innovation and how might it work, for them. So from my perspective, I'm a researcher and an educator working in higher and further education in Ireland. And I see this, on a regular basis, working with industry, working with students, working with government sectors. And that really this journey starts with a willingness of that organization to try something new and to take something on in terms of a new learning, but also to put these wider learnings into practice. So maybe I can give you a practical example. I represent the Trinity Centre for the Environment here in Dublin in Ireland. And within this, I work with a broad range of innovation ecosystems really right across the EU. Some of this work is with industry partners. As I mentioned, some of it's with government agencies or departments, and some of it's with existing or new students. And really in helping them to develop these new skills and, to get them to the space where they can begin to use systems innovation within their organization. So let me give you an example of one, which is it's happening at the moment in Ireland, and it involves many different, groups, members of the public, government departments, people from particular sectors, and actually also involves Climate-KIC. So one of these I've worked on during the years, the Climate Leadership Journey. And this is an educational project with systems innovation really at the core. It involves around 160 university students, but also early and mid-career professionals. So these participants, they receive training in systems innovation and also leadership for climate action. And then they take these learnings back to their organizations and they work within their organizations. So from this perspective, it's more kind of an entrepreneur rather than an entrepreneur, and that these individuals have really felt empowered to catalyze change from within their organizations. And that's a really nice example of systems innovation in action. If I may, I'll take another example, which is a very different scale. We are working with Climate-KIC in Ireland in a deep demonstration project, and these are projects of large-scale systems innovation. So this particular one is in agri-food systems. And it's currently ongoing, which I just mentioned, and it's a large-scale systems innovation which has been orchestrated by Climate-KIC. It's part funded by government departments here in Ireland, the Department of Food, Agriculture and the Marine, or DAFAM, and it's co-created with practitioners in Ireland. And I think this aspect of co-creation is really important in systems innovation. So working with different, practitioners, there are huge challenges within transforming agri-food systems globally, but especially in Ireland. And it's something the other speakers mentioned about, traditions and the past, that there is a huge tradition of agriculture in Ireland. And yet at the same time, we have large percentages, about 38% of the country's emissions related to land use in agriculture in Ireland. So there are huge efforts to try and reduce these carbon emissions, but this is a very complex problem, and it's one which requires a system, a working system like systems innovation to really transform the whole system. But tied with this, of course, is the whole notion of just transition. So nobody wants to be left behind. We have to think about heritage, we have to think about livelihoods, and we have to think about food production, we have to think about quality of the environment, the soil, the water quality, and the emissions from the agriculture. And this is a really, really complex challenge. So it's an example of one which is happening at the moment in Ireland. It's just really kicked off. And it's interesting to see how this is progressing even over a short time. Something I'm really encouraged by is the involvement of a range of practitioners from research, from academia, from industry, from the farming communities, from landowners, members of the public. And it's really encouraging to see the willingness of people to engage in this process and to make their voices heard in this, participatory decision-making process for what really is a very, very complex challenge. So if I may come back just briefly to your original question about, how organizations can apply systems innovation, I think for me, this really starts by embedding systems innovation from an education perspective. And I don't necessarily mean this from, a university setting necessarily, but really making systems innovation available to people as a possibility, whether it's national or international education or training or further education, and for organizations by providing the kind of environment which is really conducive for them to see value in this. And I think that value piece is really important as a central motivation to start their journey. Because I think only when the organization can see value in this can they take an informed and conscious decision to really start this journey of systems innovation. It's one which is complex, it's frustrating, it's time consuming, it can be costly, but really it's one which can show the results. When all these components come together, and the right people as decision makers come together, I think this has the power to catalyze very, very large scale change. So I'll finish there, but happy to come back to this.
Thank you so much, Quentin. And thank you for bringing us to this question of the why. It really is at the core of a lot of work that we do. And it's really crucial to start with thinking with this, motivational and initial impulse and this sort of inquiry in the center of the inquiry that we start with. Kate, Wasafiri is doing a lot of work in systems innovation across Europe and Africa. Would love to hear some of the stories of what you learned on how to make this impact and practically apply systems innovation.
Okay, well, I'm going to piggyback on Quentin because I think he's totally right to start with the why rather than the how. And I think I think the why is often because nothing else will work. And we've done a lot of work in the conflict space, and interestingly, particularly around tackling violent extremism in East Africa. And interestingly, I found that space more welcoming to systems-based approaches, I think, because people have tried a lot of other things and they haven't worked, and the costs of not working are really high. So I think why use a systems-based approaches? Because when you're tackling these sort of complex problems, other things won't work. And even though they are costly and difficult and can be time consuming, they can actually have an impact as well in spaces where other approaches often don't have an impact. So anyway, I appreciated you starting us there, Quentin. So in terms of some examples of what that looks like, I was also struck, the systems-based approach is actually, it's a way of thinking about things around interconnections and codependencies and those sort of things. And you can do that within an organization because all organizations themselves are ecosystems, they are systems, but you can also do that, between organizations. And I think sometimes, particularly for, people maybe in smaller organizations or within different types of organizations, it's hard to go, oh yeah, this is an in-organization as well as an extra organization approach. But to give you a couple of examples from ours, I'm going to stick with the food theme as well. We've been doing a lot of work in the food system for a long time, and the interesting thing about the food system is it's incredibly distributed and incredibly fractured, actually. And last year, 18 months ago, with the UN Food Systems Summit, we were quite involved in that and pulling in the voices, particularly of SMEs, small businesses, which make up the vast bulk of the global food system, but are actually almost always excluded from conversations about kind of policy and change and all these pieces of the puzzle. And so that was one of the things through the UN Food System Summit, there was a real kind of systems gap identified, actually, that the bulk of the food system is not, it's not heard, it's not seen. And actually, particularly when we talk about things like, climate adaptation and the challenges within the food system, agricultural system to do with climate, the smaller producers, consumers, producers of and manufacturers of food have much more agility than the bigger ones, right? More agility, more adaptability to shift how they operate, and yet they're excluded. So one of the pieces of work we're working on is something called the Good Food Hub, which is a sort of really ambitious piece to try and bring in those voices. It's a global online platform to connect. I guess we talk about a system gap. There is a gap in the system, and how do we wire that system together better to allow kind of better collaboration within the global food system? So, that's, anyone can go and look it up as well. It's the Good Food Hub, and it brings together those players. It's very open, it's very community based, anyone can join in, and then through those kind of identifying kind of common barriers and themes, like access to capital, or pieces about contract, and some of it gets very technical, but those are shared problems that then you can work on collectively and help people to sort of be able to shift around. So I thought that's one example of that. Spotting a system gap and helping to wire a system together better. I'd have an example from within an organization, very different context, but I don't know if you want to move on to Per. I don't want to take up all his time.
Maybe we move on, and you keep it in mind, and hopefully later on we'll have a little bit more space to interact in this way and bring in other examples. And thank you, Kate, for bringing this community aspect to it, and really looking at systems innovation from a perspective of ecosystems and what that means. I think it's really important to have that perspective. Per, over to you. What do you see from the work that you're doing?
I really, and you left us with a cliffhanger there, Kate. I want to hear what's next. It was really interesting to hear both Quentin and Kate's example. And so I don't have to talk so much about the why, because I really think that the key messages have been brought up here. So one of the things that we do, I'm a scientist, right? So I have that hat on also, but I work with change makers and have done so for quite a long time, and including everything from grassroots organizations to CEOs of big companies across the world. So but what I think is important in working in those spaces is that to provide sort of tools for operating in the context of complexity and uncertainty. Because I see a lot of people are interested. It's like a huge wave now. I've been working in this field of transformation for 22 years, and I never seen such a big wave of interest in transformation and systems change like now. There's been smaller waves, Peter Senge and Otto Scharmer, etc. But this is huge, and I think there's a big interest, which is great. But a lot of people are like listening and try to understand, but then apply everything in a very linear thinking of their old model. So it's a lot of focusing on bringing people out of these sort of old models of change. So mind shift and values shifts, etc., is really important to work on. But so what we're trying to do is to sort of talk about these tools that works better when you have high complexity and high uncertainties. And I think that we talk about it as situations where you have high uncertainty, but also high agency, as people have said here, that we have a possibility to actually change things, and humanity is capable of changing systems at very large scales. We've done it before. So then we have to think about like that space of high uncertainty, high agency. Because for example, the roadmaps that is used a lot, that concept of roadmaps, that works well when you have low uncertainty and high agency. And for example, scenarios works well when you have high uncertainty but low agency. So it's really bringing people into that space of emerging pathways of transformation, and think about systems innovation in that context. So that's we do a lot of work on that. And of course, I'm very much inspired and work a lot with Bill Sharp and the others at working with Three Horizons framework, for example. I think fits right there. And also Adam Kahane's work on stretch collaboration works there also. And also when it comes to evaluation, I like the work, for example, of Mike Quinn-Patton when it comes to developmental evaluation, and evaluation sort of tool that that works in context of high uncertainty, but you still want to try and test things and be innovative. So that's something that we do a lot. Like we're trying to sort of collect, and there's so many other tools and methods that is in that space, and some have been collected in some books, you know, the toolbox for systems change, etc. So I think, so what we're trying to do is to bring that whole sort of field into these spaces, but not just sort of give them one tool, because I think a lot of consultants, for example, they work on pushing one tool. They have decided that this is the best tool in the world, and then they decide to push that. So it's about providing a whole range of tools and methods, but also then focusing a lot on, with our change makers, of sort of try to sort of know what tool to use when, right? So that's even more. So that's working a lot with more sort of the deeper values and the understanding of complexity, etc. So we use a lot of you know, the work around wicked problems and so sort of just get in there and just try to start working with these sort of methods, but also the language around that. So I think we use a lot of sort of methods also for connecting the cutting edge work, research on transformation with the cutting edge transformation in practice. Because in my view, sometimes the transformation in practice, when I see it, it's a bit confused. It's a bit anecdotal, maybe, and so on. And the science on transformation is often lagging behind the cutting edge practitioners, and then they come up with, they generate insights that are, you know, it's like a bit of, oh, okay, we knew that. So it's really about connecting those edges. And I think that, for example, then bringing the theoretical concepts of transformation to provide some kind of canvas against which you can map your sort of the transformation process. Where in the process of transformation are we, and what's my role, etc., and what other actors are in there. So it's a bit of systems mapping, of course. And yeah, so that's but also at the same time, I just want to finish that saying, like, because I think it's really important. I think it's interesting with this connection between science and practice in this context that we're talking about here. And one thing that, of course, that when you're in that process as a researcher, there's so much questions and issues coming up that you can bring into science, and then start to sort of use as hypothesis almost for advancing the science. So I think it's a really fruitful connection.
Thank you so much, Per. I love it. Emerging pathways for transformation. I think
that's Bill Sharp, so I shouldn't take credit for that. That's from Bill Sharp's sort of way of talking about it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing it in, because like this is something that we also noticed in our work. Like there are so many beautiful tools out there, but it all really is context specific, and it has to be adaptable and changeable based on what kind of context we work in, what kind of systems we work in, who are in the room, who are the stakeholders who are engaging with us. And there is really no one pathway. There has to be this emergence of constant experimenting and playing and seeing what the system react to and what is not. Thank you all. We have another 10 minutes, and there's so many other questions that I want to ask. It's really hard to think about like what to focus on, but maybe like we have touched base a little bit on the why and some of the opportunities that comes with systems innovation and practice. I would love to ask you maybe quickly to touch base on some of the challenges of applications of systems innovation, and what do you notice? Like where are some of the kind of blocks that we would need to find a solution how to overcome in order to really cultivate this broader ecosystem around systems innovation in between the organizations and within. So maybe we change a little bit the format, and I'll pass it on to Kate to kick us off with that.
That's one of the moments I'm like, where's she going? Where's she going? Oh, I've got to think fast. Right. So what are the challenges? I mean, the challenge with this question is which one to start with. And so I'll chuck in one, and I'm sure Per Olsson won't be short of other ones to add. Per Quentin. So I think, again, from my work, I actually spent a lot of time working with with leaders and sort of senior organizational leaders who are wrestling with these complex problems. So from their perspective, what I often see is this challenge of like our ways of doing change are just not wired for this kind of the approach of like, oh, I don't really quite know what's going to happen. That's not, we're not wired for that. We're wired for like quick wins. We're wired for low-hanging fruit. We're wired for milestones. We're wired for roadmaps. We're wired to create certainty when there's uncertainty. And that the pressure to do that can make this stuff feel quite scary, because it's hard for a leader to go, I don't know what's going to happen, but I think if we do this, it might help. So I think there's a real tension in our leadership models that often make that there. And then I am going to contradict myself, because I'm going to chuck a second one in, which is the one at the moment that I'm sort of keep talking about a lot. I think systems approaches require relentless compromise. And when you work with, broad stakeholders and actors and people with different agendas, you don't work with everyone on an aligned agenda. You work with different agendas. The way that you make progress is by like relentlessly compromising, actually. And again, that can feel a really hard thing to do. Like nobody gets quite what they want. And again, our kind of leadership mentalities are often around things like, vision and direction and certainty and decisiveness. And the need to relentlessly compromise is hard. So I could keep going on this theme for a while. But just to put hope at the end, the reason to do this stuff is it does actually have an impact. It makes a difference. And that's why it's worth doing, even if it's hard. But go on, Ina. I know the other two will have.
Thank you so much, Kate. And yeah, relentless compromise. I really like that. Like, this is what we like, a challenge that we see by bringing all those different perspectives together in the same room, and sometimes having stakeholders who are opposingly in huge conflict with each other. And what does it mean to create this common table and common discussions about the topics that we're facing? Really.
And maybe the point is, the outcome you're trying to get is movement. It's not the end point. So you're compromising in order to achieve movement. That would be the hope I'd have in there. Not compromising the end goals, but it's like, what do we need to do to get things moving? And when they're moving, where can we go next? So.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kate. Quentin, over to you.
Sure thing, Ina. Well, by virtue of the nature of systems, you require interconnections, and quite often systems may be naturally connected, but actually when we think about it, quite often the actors are not. And this is really an artifact of, a construct, a siloed construct, where individuals or organizations or government departments, they may be very separate to each other in part of an existing decision-making hierarchy or process. So, when we talk about systems transformation and systems change and systems innovation, we require these components, which includes us, as parts of society, to be interconnected and to be working together. So I think a big challenge is actually how to forge these connections where they don't already exist, where there may be very kind of conflicting agendas here. There may be things which are completely at loggerheads with each other. And part of this process is to bring these different people together and these different perspectives together. And as Kate said, quite often it does involve compromise, almost invariably, I would say. But that's the kind of thing that's needed, so we need to de-silo people and places and mentalities. We need to develop new kind of mindsets which are able to kind of handle change and work with change, because most often people are very resistant to change. We may know something needs to be changed, but actually catalyzing that and acting on it is a very different matter. And that comes, I think, around to mindsets and psychology. And I'm not a psychologist, so I won't talk about that. But an observation as a natural scientist, I have seen this as major stumbling block is the resistance to change and the very kind of siloed structure of the system as it is. And so breaking down these barriers and de-siloing and getting people who don't normally interact with each other, to talk to each other and to really listen and to be part of that decision-making process. It sounds like it might be easy to do, but often that's the hugest challenge, is to get these different people in a room, get them discussing these challenges and coming to some kind of decision or compromise to move forward.
Indeed, we might have beautiful theoretical concepts and tools, but when it comes to applying them in real cases with real people who bring their own challenges and their own perspectives and their own needs and their own power dynamics, this is when things get quite hot and interesting and quite alive, and cultivating those spaces for this aliveness is an art. It's a science, but it's also an art, right? Per, over to you. What challenges do you notice in this field?
Very much in line with what's been said here. I think that solutions and the talk about solutions is problematic many times. It comes from a sort of a mindset of single solutions to single problems. Solutions, for example, to climate change, not seeing the broader picture and being aware that any solutions that we introduce in this complex system will create 7 new problems. So it's I would like to see more focus on frameworks for action instead of talking about solutions. So thinking about how we introduce solutions and how we but also how we very much look at sort of unintended negative consequences, but also unintended positive consequences. So you navigate that in a better way than we're doing now. So I see a lot of really powerful actors, like they jump on solutions too fast. And I think that Kate said that it's like when they do that, they're just sort of perpetuating the very system that needs to change. So it's about standing in that space of actually we don't know exactly what directions things are going to take and how to navigate it, but we need to stand in that space and hold that space of not knowing, because that's where we can reflect and also work with our mindsets and values, and that's what we're trying to do in our programs also, to hold that space. And then I think crisis, we need to understand the role of crisis in transformation processes. Right now we focus a lot on risks but also crisis as something that comes and just stops everything, and look at crisis, but also polycrisis, how several crises interacts and how it creates formative moments for transformations. People talk about opportunities, but I think we should be careful of talking about opportunities in times of human suffering. But it's more about formative moment, and how do you navigate that? Because we know that crisis can open up for large scale systems change. We've seen it throughout history, and I think that, but it's actually in those times when let's take a big step, that's also the time when you might have the biggest resistance. So it's not just about resistance. It will be resistant and people don't want to change, but it's also about when resistance happens. So I think we're pretty bad at navigating that. So when we have the opportunity to shift systems, we end up in what you pointed out already, these sort of conflicts, polarization, and so on, and we don't have the tools to navigate that. And that's why I think Adam Kahane's stretch collaboration is a way of working with transformations in situations where you can't come to a consensus, but you can be very far from each other, but you can still work with transformative change. And I think that's hopeful. And that those tools are out there. And Kate talked about these situations and problems that are really serious and that we see around the world, of radicalization, etc., and polarization. I think these tools are immensely needed. But then we also need to understand that crisis. We talk about the anatomy of a crisis or a crisis landscape, that there are several of these sort of things happening. And we just did a project here called Rapid Transition Lab, as a way of how do you mobilize networks of actors in those times in order to work with the issues that I talked about, and in order to, for example, we focus on the Swedish food system, and how do you use these tools to increase the chances to embark on transformative pathways in times of crisis.
Thank you so much. I have to admit, I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I wish we had another hour to continue our conversation. But I really want to build up a little bit on your last comment, Per, and this inquiry about how to mobilize networks of actors. I think it's a really interesting way of looking at the systems innovation field and really broadening our horizons instead of thinking in silos, what Quentin was mentioning, with what we can do as individual organizations, but what we can also do as communities, as a network of different actors working towards the common purpose. And very quickly, maybe I would love to hear from you again, like talking about this fostering space and fostering learning and skills that are needed to accelerate systems transformation. Maybe you can share just a few skills that you believe are crucial for enabling and fostering the systems innovation field. And let's do it popcorn style, so no pressure. Whoever wants to start, go ahead first.
I can
Okay,
start.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
Oh, two of us at the same time. That was going to happen.
3 of us.
You go, Claire.
All of us.
After you.
No, just one thing that I think about is that how you, not just how you create these spaces, but also who invites to them, right? And I think that's where I have to reflect on my own role, because I might want to do good and I have good intentions and I want to bring people together, but I'm a white middle-aged man from Sweden, and the way that I just I have the systems, like patriarchal systems, the colonial systems in me, whether I want it or not, and the way that I invite and set it up might actually, as I said before, perpetuate the very systems that I want, that I think needs to change. And so I think that's an important aspect. And how do you invite? And I know that I work with a lot of scholars and others with indigenous background, and in North America, for example. And I think I love those conversations where this is brought up, and I feel like I have so much to learn about how I want to sort of contribute to change in the world. And I think I like this conversation about decolonization and decolonizing science, decolonizing this and that. So it's one aspect.
Beautiful. Thank you for bringing that in. Really fundamental, deep problems and challenges that we face. Quentin, Kate?
After you, Quentin.
Okay. So in terms of skills and competencies, I think that's what you mentioned, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let me give you an example, a tangible example. I'm currently working on a project in Ireland. It's funded by the Higher Education Authority. And the project is entitled Ireland's Knowledge Centre for Carbon, Climate and Community Action. And it's really a pilot project in a way. It is a 3-year project, but we're looking to really shake up and innovate within higher and further education systems in Ireland, to really move away from a model that is thinking of single institutions offering single modules or courses, to put together a whole kind of portfolio of knowledge, and for people to really take ownership of this and to make it widely available to the general public. So really kind of moving away from conventional models. So for me, when I think about skills and competencies of systems innovation and what can make this work, I suppose it's adaptability, having a certain amount of agility, being able to work with very complex scenarios. Specifically for this project, we're looking at future education, training, and future skills needs. And you almost need, a crystal ball to be able to look into the future to make some educated guesses about how you think things are going to go. And a lot of this is about embracing uncertainty, because there are huge uncertainties associated with our current situation, in particular the climate crisis. So, as a humanity, we haven't been in this scenario before. So it's very difficult to know how to respond. And I think this makes a lot of people uncomfortable. So in terms of skills and competencies, also, I think to work with systems innovation, you need to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, and to be able to work with complexity and uncertainty, but also, more than that, to actually embrace these things. So, being able to embrace things that feel really uncomfortable and to be able to work with these. And a lot of this comes down to mindsets, but certainly, speaking as a scientist, analytical skills, and being able to work within teams and to be working with people with very different sets of competencies, I think, to make this work, because these complex challenges require really complex solutions, and this requires interaction between lots of different people with different types of competencies. So the communication skill certainly is very high up there, and the ability to be able to work with very different range of communication styles and different people as part of that process.
Thank you so much, Quentin. And Kate, over to you to close our fantastic conversation. What else do we need to keep in mind to foster systems innovation?
Well, I think building a bit on, as you were talking, Per, I was remembering about this thing about collaborating and how the invitation happens. And those collaborations, if to be useful, they're going to be between people who see the world in really different ways. And I was reminded of a woman I was with who'd been part of a brilliant project called Girl Effect, which was a partnership between what was then DFID, Department for International Development, the UK's department, and the Nike Foundation. And it was around girls sort of, it worked in Ethiopia, Rwanda, and a third country, which just slipped my mind, sorry. And this friend I was talking to said, she was from the Nike Foundation, said, we spent 9 months sitting around a table with DFID, all of us going, no, I don't understand you. No, I don't understand you. I don't understand you. And it took 9 months to just work. Like, these are just organizations that just talk and think and frame in different ways, but the perseverance to spend 9 months kind of figuring out what each other was saying. And then they went on to do a fantastic piece of work. So that reminded me of that. So that I guess the skill is the patience to go, I don't understand you. And I'm just going to keep being here till I do. And I'm going to keep being curious, not going, walking out at that point you don't understand. So I think there's a skill around that. I think there's something, and that something comes with, like, we talk about serving the problem, not the institution. And can you elevate yourself enough to say, I'm here to serve the problem, and I'll sacrifice some of my own kind of like career currency or whatever it is, or my beliefs about this is the way we frame things, or this is the way we do things. Serving the problem. And then I think one to the likes of us, those of us that sit in this complexity world and system stuff, we love all the uncertainty and the messiness and the interconnectedness, and we love all the create movement, not solve things. I say these things all the time. But I think there's something for us when we're working with people who are feeling different sorts of pressures in the world to go, oh, okay, we can do some stuff here, we can achieve some stuff here. And for me, that shows up in there's a bit of turning up with a bit of hope and cheerfulness in these spaces, because otherwise it can feel all a bit overwhelming. So I think it's an undervalued, perhaps, dispensation skill, but there's something about bringing some hope into these things, and feeling like we can make a difference, or can have an impact, can create movement, and not getting too lost in our own kind of technicalities. So I will finish there.
Thank you, Kate. This is a brilliant way to sort of finish our conversation, finishing on hope. With hope. and with a lot of humility, celebrating diversity of different perspectives and views, celebrating diversity, celebrating humanity, and our strive to connect and engage with challenging topics in challenging circumstances, but still having that persistence and continuous hope. Thank you all. Thank you, Quentin. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Per, for this wonderful Monday morning conversation. I'm wishing you all the best rest of the day and the week, and really excited to continue conversation in different formats and in different ways further on. And now I would love to pass it on to Laura to give us a little bit of a summary of what she has heard from our wonderful conversation today. So Laura, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ina, and thank you everyone. Thank you, Quentin, Kate, and Pierre, for a very energizing and inspiring conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I've been taking some notes desperately fast and quickly. And my task now, not very easy task, is to bring you a summary now of the key takeaways and the key actions for those wanting, especially in the context now of COP27 about to kick off in Egypt and the very important conversations that will take place, to bring some tips, some kind of key actions for those wanting to strengthen their climate action using a systems innovation mindset and approach. So it's been talked about a lot about systems innovation and what it is, and we hear lots of words that can fly around like interdependencies and uncertainty and complexity, and you know, it's becoming more and more apparent that a systems approach is key to actually tackling specific problems. So what does it all mean? It means, from what we're hearing, that is being able to identify the sort of bigger picture, being able to take that sort of step back, to take a whole approach of the whole wide context of a specific problem that we might be facing in a specific place at a specific time, and actually not losing sight as well of the specificities and the opportunities and levers of change that challenge might be presenting in that specific place and context. So one of the first things that we have to do is to, instead of fighting it or trying to solve it, is actually to embrace complexity as an inherent component of this task that we have at hand, and to try and tackle those problems with that sort of embracing that complexity aspect. So that might entail actually having to put ourselves in a position where we look at familiar problems from a slightly unfamiliar way, and actually being able to apply some more left thinking and out of the box ways of thinking. And what has become key and very clear is that collaboration is the key, you know, is the word of the game, really. Being able to bring a variety of voices within these complex systems and the interconnectedness of it all, and enable us, this variety and this diversity will enable us to draw a very accurate picture, a much more accurate picture of the opportunities that we, and the potential solutions that we need to develop. Systems innovation is linked to transformation. So that's why if we really want the buy-in and challenging those systems that are currently delivering unwanted outcomes, we need to include all actors to be able to design that solution and to put their efforts and their energy behind those solutions when implemented. So just, you know, it's essential to map this whole context of relationships. And when we talk about these relationships, it's not just in the place and in the moment, but also with the planet, with those communities that our activities might be affecting, and wherever this might be, and also with the future generations. So there's enabling that sort of widening of the frame and widening of the concept of what success might mean and benefit and profit might mean, to really expand it beyond our small circles as it's been probably up until now. So why systems innovation? First of all, because clearly the sort of linear old kind of approaches that we've been using up until now haven't delivered the transformation that we need to see, and have in fact created a myriad of unintended problems that we are kind of compounded now into obviously the crisis that climate change brings to us. So applying systems change approach, a systems change approach alongside innovation principles enables for rapid learning loops, capturing the learning in a way that can be rapidly implemented in successive loops and crucially be shared beyond as well, which is very important. Systems innovation allows for a wide range of voices, as we were saying, to be involved in how our systems are designed moving forward, which brings a participative approach that is more likely to yield those better results and to get people behind from all walks of society, bringing agency to everyone. Systems, to give an example, like the agriculture and food industries are incredibly fragmented and complex, and it's harder for the smaller actors to get heard or to get a seat at the table. However, it's those smaller actors that have more ability to innovate, to adapt very rapidly, and to innovate and to implement those rapid changes, seeing the gaps emerging in the landscape, in the system. So enabling and supporting these smaller communities, making them less fragmented, is crucial to keep the strength of the whole system, since without them, the system itself would weaken. So agency is also the name of the game. And to enable emerging pathways for transformation, it's important to connect the cutting edge research and also combine it with the learnings constantly arising from the actual practice on the ground. That dynamic conversation will serve the perfect grounds for useful, meaningful innovations that respond to both the needs and challenges and also the science behind our systems, including our climate system. So just very quickly, how to cultivate system innovation approaches, and what are the challenges and actually how to move forward with them. So forging connections where they don't currently exist is crucial, bringing together that wide range of people and perspective, and de-silo, fragment and break down those barriers to those different perspectives is key to overcome resistance to change. Also, it's important to overcome the temptation to jump quickly to solutions. We've seen actually that our ways of doing change are wide for quick wins, low-hanging fruit, clear roadmaps. However, systems innovation requires relentless compromise, which can be a really hard thing to deliver. You need to hold the space and actually sit slightly more uncomfortably for a while the voices that you're trying to convene and keep together actually compose and co-create pictures for those solutions that are co-designing are participative and democratic and are more likely to succeed. So what we need in this space basically is a leadership and a mindset that brings bravery and humility and a lot of hope. And those are the best tools that we have now as people, as members of society, leaders. We're all leaders in our own spaces to bring to this task and to this challenge. So I think that's the summary, and I hope that's been useful. And thank you everyone again for Kate and Pierre and Quentin for your contributions. Really enjoyed the roundtable today.
Thank you so much, Laura, for this wonderful summary and really harvesting in such a beautiful way the essence of the conversation that we had today. And I would love to pass it on to Samantha to wrap us up and close us off. It's been a wonderful session, and it's been a real pleasure to moderate it this morning for all of our speakers. Samantha, over to you.
Thank you, Ina. Thank you for moderating this session. You have done an amazing job in bringing all these very wide and diverse perspectives on the table. This is just a start of the conversation because the topic is so vast and there are so many examples and so many challenges that we should discuss still. So please, everyone, take this just as a start of the conversation, and please stay tuned with us. We have a small surprise for you. We have a small time lapse of a drawing of today's session which we are going to share with you now. But later on, we are going to have a part 2 of this conversation, and it's more focused on how to orchestrate this change. And we have a different panel of speakers, amazing speakers as well. So please stay tuned today at 3 p.m. European time, and we are tuning live from Egypt. Right now, we are gonna play the time lapse.